Welcome to the April 14th edition of Trips and Traps. I'm Richard Migliore, joined by my main man, Ernie Munick. The M&M boys are in the house. Trips and Traps, or TNT as we call it, because we're going to blow it up.
Oh, yes. We have some fun stuff to talk about and a major race to take apart as well.
Yeah, we're going to really get into the Wood Memorial and look at several trips in there. But first, let's start on April 7th, race 2, and we're going to take a look at number 4, Divine Child. And Ernie, this is one that you pointed out to me, and I thought this horse actually did a lot of running from behind when no one else was making that move, and we'll keep an eye on her as she doesn't break too well, and that kind of sets up her trip.
You know, and also, Mig, you've mentioned this so many times, whether on the air or off, but sometimes the horses that break the best run around the track together. It's just amazing that that happens. And here is a situation where Petrocelli, Finding Candy, and Bad Hombre basically went around together and nobody was making any headway.
No, it was what we would call a merry-go-round race. Now, there are 2 grays in here, so we wanted to be clear. It's the gray that's last now, actually, number 4, the lighter of the 2 grays. And I think this really shows how important starts are, and particularly when you get a muddy sealed track, a lot of times it's the horses that aren't getting that kickback that run the best.
The ones that come home clean. And, you know, it's so funny, Mick. As we watch this race now in Divine Child at the back of the field, last, and again, number 4 in the back, and is at this point not making up any ground. When you're getting, I once asked you, is it fun riding out there in the mud? It looks like so much fun to me. If you were a kid, it'd be great. But you were like, A, it's not fun, and B, you can really give them the business out there, kicking back mud behind you.
Well, absolutely. You want to make it as difficult as you can on them, and it's work when it stays like this because you run out of goggles. And I even wonder if Eric Cancel said, you know what, I got to get out of this mud because we're going to see just how wide Divine Child goes. And I was calling it a she. It's a he, excuse me. But this horse is, what would you say conservatively, 7 wide here?
Well, at this point, maybe a little less than that, but he's going to fan a bit wider. Once they let it roll, you'll see. I mean, he's right now, you know, 5 to 6 wide, maybe 7 wide. Then they're right there. He looks 7 wide to me.
Yeah, and now, you know, down on the outside, on the crown of the track, and you see the 3 horses that ran 1, 2, 3 around the racetrack, they don't change positions, but I thought Divine Child did well, and subtly well, because still well beaten, about 7.5, almost 8 lengths, that people might dismiss the effort, but the fact that this horse was the only horse making up any ground tells me this horse ran okay.
He did, and he ran very well for Oscar Barrera, who we talked about on the last Trips and Traps, doing good work. It was claimed by David Canizzo, but props to Oscar for just doing a fine job over the last few months.
You know, I have to say, you know, watching post braids as closely as I do now, Oscar's horses look terrific, but Dave Canizzo's horses look terrific on the track, too. And you see that MO. Now, that doesn't really say a horse is going to run well that they look good, but I do think it speaks to the horsemanship involved, having horses with that good, rich coat like that.
There must be a lot of pride in that among people on the back stretch when their horses come out and look good.
I think I want Divine Child back in a similar situation, just maybe when speed isn't so dominant. Yes,
definitely. And, you know, it's frustrating sometimes. You do all the work, even not just for handicappers, for horsemen. You have your horse ready to go, and a track is favored, strongly favored in one way. It must be very disheartening.
Well, and it's not like race cars. You can't just tweak something and make a horse change his style for one race. Horses either have speed or they don't. Yeah. This is a horse I do want back when speed isn't king. Let's take a look at another horse that, from April 7th, later in the day, that I thought really shows when a horse is green, especially from the kickback. And we're talking about number 8, Naked Empress.
Yeah, who has, you know, gets off a little bit sluggishly, maybe touches the side of the gate, and in the maroon cap, Mig, right now I'd say 3rd from last. And right there, Mig, is that the climbing already starting?
Yeah, and you're going to see it's going to get even worse, and you're going to see she's kind of ducking and dodging, jumping up and down a bit, and goes backwards. And I always say it's like running with the emergency brake on. You can see her action's going to change, her head's going to come up, and she really isn't comfortable. Here is I think, a prime example of that.
That's very right, and even still, it's just very interesting. And there's even some in the head-on is a little bit, not really weaving. That's exaggerating it, but you can see that the horse. I don't know whether it's just trying to find a groove somehow, and it's not happening until very late.
Well, let me ask you a question. If you were running and I was running in front of you backwards, throwing dirt in your face, you'd probably be moving your head side to side, trying to get out of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I think this horse is a prime example, too, Ernie, that this was the kind of race that can be built off of, and a horse that I think will really appreciate when they stretch out a bit more.
Definitely. And, you know, this I'm not saying the horse is beautifully bred for turf. Maybe not beautifully bred, but there's some turf in the pedigree too, and we're heading towards Belmont and these two-turn turf races. So it's just something to keep in mind as we watch this maroon cap go towards the rail and finish well.
And again, the horses that ran 1-2 were involved early. This filly, Naked Empress, is so far back, and now you see her on the rail, and we're going to watch the gallop out as well. This horse kept coming, and I like horses back that run through the finish line. And
the leveled off. There's that level off. It's very interesting. You know, sometimes it's an illusion because everyone else is going slow, but the action's not an illusion, right? The action level smoothed over.
Well, you can see there's separation now. She's not getting hit with that kickback. Also, never discount the fact that early in a race, when horses are fresh, and now you're going to see about an eighth of past the wire, maybe not quite even, she's in front and continuing on, and not under urging to do so. She was doing it on her own. I like Naked Empress, especially if we stretch out a bit further, maybe we go 7/8 or a mile. I think she's going to be very tough. But early in a race, when the kickback's coming back, horses are running faster earlier in dirt races. It's not like turf racing where they start slower and they finish faster. They start faster and finish slower. That kickback is coming back even harder, and there's not any separation, and that's when you see horses react badly to it. You'll hear a lot of times the trainers say, well, I schooled this horse in the morning behind dirt. They don't throw the dirt back as hard in the morning, and there aren't as many horses in front of you.
That's very interesting. And I always get a kick out. And you don't say this that often, but occasionally you'll say, this dirt horse has a kick like a turf horse, like Saludos Amigos' move. I love that. You know, I'm chilling just saying that, I swear. But you don't say it that often.
No,
but it's so cool when you see that.
Yeah, you get a turn of foot on the dirt, but usually it's only on the turf. That's when you're talking about good horses.
Exciting.
Absolutely. Well, now let's talk about a horse that I think we both agree maybe didn't have a bad trip, but we're going to go to race 7 on April 10th and talk about Backside of the Moon, number 6. And this horse may be just a bit overmatched here. This was a pretty salty group of horses.
Absolutely. Is this Backside of the Moon? Are we watching the right race at the moment?
No, actually, I think this is the 6th race from that same day.
All right, it's the 6th race. Yeah, because then we're going to go to it's the 7th race that day. And, Mig, as you said, it's no big, eventful trip. It's more, it's simple stuff, but it's gameness, it's pace, and who he's running against.
Okay, we got the right race queued up now, so let's go to race 7 from the same day. And this is a horse that I liked a great deal the time before, where he basically went wire to wire. Now this time, he's in with a really tough group of horses, and this pace was hot, and he was on the hard chase. I don't think he's good enough to beat these kind of horses, and we're going to see him. He's on the outside in the yellow. And the one horse broke really, really quickly, and actually looked like he may go gate to wire, but then Toledo Eddie took over with his speed.
And you go back in Backside of the Moon's record, and I'm thinking of that race in December when he had a bit of a tough start and was far off the pace and closed a lot of ground. He doesn't have to be out there being used chasing a horse like Toledo Eddie or even running with Unbridled Wand. Without those horses, without having to be, being one of the pace factors, I think would be a very serious player.
You know, it's just an interesting thing, though, when you've had success with a horse going gate to wire. You kind of get it stuck in your head that you want to be up close to the pace. It's a completely different type of race, though. Last time was a much slower pace, and they might have been better to go back to those rating tactics and see if he can pick up pieces, because I think we both agree. He had every right to completely pass out at the quarter pole and finish last. And
Definitely.
The fact that he still is hanging around, albeit well beaten, but still hanging around for 4th tells me he's got some quality.
I mean, Mike is all in. He was all in around the 5/16, and yet, right here, you think if you had a bet, wouldn't you think probably going to finish last?
Absolutely. Tecton's moving up the rail. Hereditary's moving in between them. Mike's kind of out there now because he couldn't hold position. And this horse looks like he is completely done. And the fact that he just kind of, labored on. I mean, he wasn't running per se, but he didn't cave in.
No. And listen, honestly, the top 2, clearly the best horse, are superior to what's behind them. But as Mick said at the very top of this race, some class relief, maybe a change in tactics, and a track playing fair, and you might be good to go.
Well, and I like this horse. I do think this horse is a nice horse. He's not up to these kind of horses. Toledo Eddie is a serious horse, and he was coming back on a week's rest after a big effort. And certainly Unbridled Wand, his races from Florida, these were 2 pretty rugged customers.
Yes.
But does he get that class relief? Does he wind up in a maybe a claiming race?
It's so tricky, and one of these things that we don't think about as handicappers that much is how frustrating, how difficult it is to find the right spot for your horse. What if there's nothing out there? I guess you put him back in a very tough spot. I guess if he's ready to go, you can't keep waiting, right?
He's got some pedigree. Maybe he's a horse they shop. You wind up on maybe one of these off the turf kind of events. You know, some of those races.
Yeah.
He's got some ability. He's just got to land in the right spot now. Talking about ability, we're going to go back a day to April 9th, and we're going to talk about the Wood Memorial, our last Kentucky and most important Kentucky Derby prep, and we're going to keep an eye on the inside 3 horses: the 1, Shagaf, the 2, Adventist, and the 3, the eventual runner-up, Trojan Nation. Now, 2 things that stood out to me, Ernie. You see Kendrick Carmouche. He rushed Adventist hard, and now he's having to steady a bit. In turn, Shagaf, who wasn't ridden aggressively at all, was caught inside of him, and he had to steady out. And Trojan Nation, Aaron Grider said, you know what, I'm 80-1 on a maiden. I'm going to let him drop back and see if I can pick up the pieces. And he almost got all the money.
It's beautiful. And I'm just wondering, and this is so unfair. First of all, it's hard for me to imagine that Kendrick was not riding to instructions. But the horse seems to be, I am so fascinated by this horse, Mig. It's like, I want to see if Leah can smooth him over, if it's even possible. Is it something about his gait? Whether it's sloppy into that first turn, is it a bit thing? Is it a greenness thing? Does he want to make one slow, long run on his own? Mig, what do we do with as armchair trainers?
Well, now we see Adventist number 2 is a little closer. And then we've got the 1, Shagaf, behind him. And I think Shagaf did too much in the middle of the race. Adventist, I wish that Kendrick hadn't rushed him so much. You see, that he wanted to have position, but I think this horse does not want to be rushed. And Trojan Nation's still in another area code. He's still out in the 212 area code, and we're in 718 over here. Shagaf has to tap on the brakes here, but what's more costly? Losing the ground that Adventist is losing here, or that momentary steady that Shagaf had to do there? And now we're going to see Trojan Nation, most patiently handled by Aaron Grider, and I thought he gave him a terrific ride, was saving every inch of ground, and he's making the last run.
Over the years, you've talked about how in races when these rivals, whether it's sneaky rivals like Shagaf and Adventist or Matt King Cole and Outwork, we're watching each other. They're watching each other, and when horses are watching each other, that's a perfect time for some other horse who's maybe not involved with all the inner arguing going on to come up and get him, and it almost happened.
It almost worked, but Outwork is the horse that eventually wins it. Was he waiting a bit and then found a bit more when Trojan Nation got to him, or was Trojan Nation a little bit uncomfortable inside? And my question to you is, who ran the best race in this race?
Oh, Mig, listen, we disagree. We have been on Adventist from the very start. From the very start. And, I want to say he might have been best, but this is the second or third time I want to say he might have been best. One day it's going to work out for him. I'm curious about his action, what will change or what won't change. He's a really good horse. I'm waiting for him to break through.
I want to see him one time not be rushed at all.
I
Just
agree.
let him find his rhythm wherever he is and come with a run. He's been on Trips and Traps so much, though, we might have to start paying royalties to Jeff Treadway because he's a regular guest star now. And maybe he's a horse that just right now is a little bit unlucky. I like the horse. I think in some respects he may have been best, but I can't get past Outwork doing all the dirty work, putting Matt King Cole away, and finding more when a perfect trip Trojan Nation challenged him.
And so confidently ridden by Johnny V out there in the 5-path. For just letting him ride the other ones, maybe doesn't get involved early. Meg, if the Derby horse is someone if the perfect Derby horse is a horse who has been through adversity, who has had several tough trips and is now ready for the race of his life, could that be Adventist? Or is it just a lot for a horse who hasn't run brilliantly fast?
I think it'd be a lot for him. And personally, and I have no stake in this, and I'm not his owner, I'm not his trainer, he'd be my Belmont horse. I'd run in the Peter Pan, the Belmont, and I think 1.5 miles would suit him. And what's wrong with winning the Belmont Stakes? Well, and what's wrong with Trips and Traps? We could use your help out there. Trips and Traps at NYRAInc.com. We had a couple of stops and starts here, a couple of things falling over, but we made it through, and we'll see you here next week.